Trump confirming this week he'll declare a national emergency on immigration, much warranted, and use Pentagon money and our military for mass deportations once he gets into office. Now, those working closely with Trump on immigration also pledging to bring back Remain in Mexico, a very successful policy that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ended as they worked to destroy the sovereignty of this country about 4 years ago. Trump has a much-needed ally in Senator Rand Paul, who's going to head the Senate Homeland Security Committee and has pledged to bring back Remain in Mexico. And Senator Rand Paul joins us now. And, sir, it's good to have you back on. Remain in Mexico forces asylum seekers to wait for their cases to be heard in Mexico. You say the Homeland Security Committee's first hearing will be about reinstating that policy. Will this be more effective, doing it this way than just an executive order?
Well, you know, I think executive order will be in order at the time Trump comes in. But the thing is that in addition to that, there are some policies that we need to address. For example, most people see the images of people coming across the river and don't understand why they can't be placed right back on the other side. Why people come across the river and they're coming through concertina wire, and our Border Patrol's cutting the wire to give them access to our country. So I think we need to address what are the legalities, what are the rules that can be changed, what can be done through executive order, and what requires legislation. But I'm for all of the above. My understanding is that immigration law says that the president may admit migrants to this country under asylum. It doesn't say shall. So I think the president has the prerogative, whether there's a pandemic or not, the president has the prerogative to say we're full and we're simply not taking migrants for asylum at this time. I think the president has that much leeway. So I think he can, through executive order, simply say no more. But we have to also address what the policy is for those coming across the border. Are we going to process them and say, no, you can't come after we've processed you in our country? Yep. No, I think they should be immediately placed back on the other side. And what happens is the people coming from all over Central America and South America, they don't want to stay in Mexico. They want to come to America. So when they're forced to stay there while it's processed, guess what? They quit coming. It slows down the flow.
Yeah, I mean, and to all these blue state leaders, you know, that are vowing to fight this, you know, Tom Homan said last night that, you know, that they can't prevent that. They're not allowed to stand in the way of the federal government going after illegals in the country. Does that sound accurate to you? I mean, if blue state leaders try to stand in the way, is there something that can be done to move them out of the way?
I think what I would do if I were in charge of the immigration situation would be to first to go after those who have committed crimes. You know, the big news right before the election was that there were 15,000 people in our country who have committed murder. There are about 13,000 that have committed sex crimes, violent sex crimes. That's 28,000 people. Why don't we start with that 28,000? Why don't we put out an all-points bulletin and when we have them removed? I think if we start there, we'll be fine. I'm not in favor of sending the Army in uniforms into our cities to collect people. I think it's a terrible image, and that's not what we use our military for. We never have, and it's actually been illegal for over 100 years to bring the Army into our cities. Army and our military are trained to shoot the enemy. They're not trained to get a warrant to do what they're doing. The police have a difficult job, but the people removing people from our country need to be a police enforcement domestic agency, not the military. I'm all for Remain in Mexico, I will not support an emergency to put the Army into our cities. I think that's a huge mistake.
Do you think that's what Trump is intending to do?
Well, that's what he said yesterday, or his spokesman said. The stories all said he would declare an emergency to use the military to remove people. I'm not for that. I'm not for really most presidential emergencies because they smack of martial rule. They smack of no congressional approval. They smack of no checks and balances. So, look, I'm supportive of President Trump. I'm supportive of removing people illegally here, particularly people who have committed crimes. But I'm not for the Army marching up and down our streets. I think it's a terrible image to send the world. It's a terrible image for us as citizens. And so I hope he will think twice about trying to use an emergency edict to have the Army patrolling our country.
I understand that. I also just, you know, I look logistically. It's like, I mean, we just let 20 million people or 15 million people into the country, which is just pure insanity. So I can understand why there's this, you know, why some people maybe feel that there's a need for a drastic measure like that.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to drastic measures. I'm not opposed to going all in for this, but I would do it in stages. The American people will be behind him 100% if he goes immediately after the people that have committed crimes, the people who've been released from prisons in Venezuela, the bad people that have been admitted to this country. Let's go there and start there. There is, to my mind, some question of the people, the housekeeper who's been here 30 years, and I don't see the military putting her in handcuffs and marching her down the street to an encampment. I don't really want to see that. I would like to see something where, and I don't think that person should get to vote either. So I think that that person, there might be an in-between solution where if they're already working productively, that we allow them to have a work permit. So I would expand, actually, a lot of the idea of work permits for people, but they don't get rewarded with voting. And I really think us as conservatives who are supportive of Trump need to caution him about sending the army into our cities.
You know, everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmitt tonight on Newsmax.